more introductions. Well, as those keep going, I'm going to go ahead and pull up our agenda here on the screen. You should be seeing a little bit of an outline of our time together. We're going to start with a brief review of the last QCF EDI learning session that was dedicated to gender and trans topics. Then we're going to move into our first discussion time, and then journey across 3 different themes. And each of those will have an accompanying discussion with those. And then that will bring us to last questions, reflections, or anything else that folks want to share. If that sounds all right with everybody, then we're going to go ahead and proceed. I'm still seeing people dropping info in the chat. Love it. We can, okay, there we go. Go ahead and get started. All right. So I don't know how many of you were here the last time that we were gathered for EDI learning session on trans topics. But if you were here, you'll remember Austin Hartke gave a awesome presentation that was something akin to Trans 101. Even if you were not here for that presentation, I think it mirrored other types of Trans 101 presentations. And so even if you missed it through QCF, it's probably content that is, I'm gonna go ahead and guess, not brand new to the folks who are here. One thing that Austin started with in his presentation was this question of what is gender? And he introduced all of us to what is called the biopsychosocial model, which is a fancy way of saying that gender is made up of a combination of our identity, our body, and social expression. He also spent a lot of time teaching through different terms and definitions and more definitions because language and its usage matters a lot. I get the sense just based on the introductions that folks have gave in the chat that vocabulary on LGBTQ topics is not new. And most of us probably have experienced that the definitions change. And my own experience of LGBTQ vocabulary, or even gender-specific vocabulary, is it's a great place to get us started, but it doesn't do much more than what, say, studying vocabulary for a standardized test might do. That's information that lives in your brain, but how it actually plays out, how you start to treat people because of that information is a lot. There's a lot of misses that can happen. But again, if you are a person who the vernacular around these topics tends to leave you feeling sort of stuck or raises questions for you, I highly encourage a rewatch of Austin's video, which I believe Carrie mentioned was in the email announcement. So you can go back and watch that anytime. Last year's learning session, the other thing was that Austin spent a lot of time with the topic of pronouns. And similar to language, very important. It's an excellent starting place. It really grounds specifically trans topics that are related to showing respect, acknowledging dignity. Very simple, very straightforward. Yes, many of us get stuck on pronouns, but that is a worthwhile watch if that's something that you're feeling nervous or wanting more practice around. Overall, the session that Austin shared, and I would say Trans 101 sessions at large, give us great information, give us good data points. But what today is going to go ahead and assume is that you've explored this topic at least through, a Zoom somewhere at some point over the last few years. And so maybe that isn't the best way to go, but I'm just starting from the guess that there is a baseline here around gender identity, and other relevant topics. So an alternative title for this session could be, Trans/Gender 201. And what 201 is going to be all about is practicing what you all already know. So that kind of takes us to our opener here. I want to go ahead and get the conversation going. I really appreciate Carrie sharing the community agreements here. One of those, I can't remember how it was phrased, but something to the effect of that we're co-learners. We're really trying to subvert this idea that there is experts and non-experts, and really lean into the reality that we all have a lot of experience and wisdom that we're bringing to tonight. And so I want to begin by exploring that. I am going to invite folks also, if you feel comfortable again, to raise your hand in the Zoom as a reaction. And maybe for those, again, who want to share, we can go around, and I want to hear if you've been thinking about gender intentionally for a while, or if that's always been something just more subconscious for you. What kinds of experiences, trainings, or activities have you participated in around this topics? I fully believe that we are all always doing gender learning. And so I want to know, where are folks coming from, and what do you hope to get out of this? Where do you want to be going? The way this is going to work is I'm going to read a series of statements, and then we're going to discuss those statements together. It could be great. It could be chaotic. It might be both of those. Nevertheless, I think we're going to have a good time. So if I could turn your attention to this slide here, and I'm going to read to you a reflection. Theme 1, this, that, both, beyond, neither, none, but are you gay? Statement. There are so many shapes and sizes, limitations, and possibilities within gender systems created around a perceived binary. For those of us who've attended Transgender 101 presentations before, or are in community with trans folks, you might have come to discover that there are as many takes on gender and transness as there are people in the world. You have trans people who are binary men or women. You have trans people who are more connected to words like non-binary, gender non-conforming, gender fluid, gender queer, or agender. They may say, I have no gender at all. They might describe themselves as gender expansive, or I've even heard gender adventurous. And then all of the folks within this expansive community usually have an orientation as well. This might be gay, lesbian, queer, heterosexual, bisexual, asexual, or it could be none of the above. And because everyone has some way of relating to their own gender and some way of relating to the genders of others, this often lends itself to a hard line drawn and distinction made between gender and sexual orientation. So this is what I want to talk about. The question is, why do you all think there is an emphasis on, well, rather an emphasis within gender learning on dividing orientation and gender? Does this feel good to us? Does it not feel good to us? Is there problems? There's no right answer here. I really just want to talk about what we think is behind this, like sexual orientation and gender identity are completely separate. They don't overlap. That whole idea. What do we think about that? Again, if you have other reflections or other thoughts you want to share, please continue to put those in the chat or write them down, because we are going to circle back to any bit of content that somebody wanted to go deeper into. But for the sake of our time here, I am going to go ahead and introduce this second theme for us to discuss, and it's what Carrie already mentioned. And it's this: time, space, and the dynamism of gender. Again, I'm gonna read a little reflection here and then open it up for us to talk about. Reflection 2. Gender, for many people, has been seen to shift and change over time. Our gender expression, in particular, can look different from one context to the next. You might do things or not do things based on how masculine or feminine your community perceives a certain look or behavior to be. What is affirmed in one space isn't always affirmed in another, so it's not uncommon to adjust accordingly. Gender can function differently depending on the culture you're in, and it has been known to shift over time inside even partnerships. So I want to talk about this. In your experience, how do you relate to your own gender? How do you express it? Have you ever felt in the past, or are there situations in the present where there is some kind of expectation for what it should look like to be your gender? Knowing that masculinity and femininity mean different things to different people, I'd love to hear too what they mean to you. No right or wrong answers. I know for some people this is like a slippery topic because they don't want to say something is feminine to them because they imagine that others will hear that and think that they're having an antiquated view, of masculinity and femininity. But the whole point is that what is masculine and what is feminine changes. And I just want to talk about what they mean to you, what they have meant to you, and just like what's your own experience of relating to either of those, both of those, something else, that has not already been mentioned in this space. Yeah. How do you relate to your own gender and how do you express it? That's the question. Our last theme here is, what does intersectionality have to do with it? I'm just going to go ahead and make another assumption that this is not a brand new term to folks. But if it is, hopefully in the statement I'm going to share, that will be illuminated. Again, I'm really trying to get away from like vocabulary equals this definition. But I do believe that language, matters. It is powerful and it helps inform how we move. So yeah, I'm just going to read this. And maybe if your question is, can you say again what intersectionality is? Then we'll start there. but I'm going to go ahead and get the statement. Beyond gender looking different across space, time, and culture, we also know that the day-to-day experiences for trans folks differs across various other intersections of identity. Race, class, disability, age, language, nationality, religion. All of these things overlap and intersect with our gender. If we're going to deepen our understanding of gender topics, there is no way to do that without considering the links between all of the different identities one may hold. Intersectionality in this case does not just mean that some people within the trans community have it materially worse or better than others. It means that systems and structures dramatically impact our lived experiences and can be vastly different. Our comforts and discomforts can be vastly different. The things we have access to and are denied from can be vastly different. Who gets to be considered valid and trustworthy can be vastly different. So one way this plays out is the differences between experiences of trans women and trans femme people and the experiences of trans men and trans masculine people. While transphobia impacts everyone across the gender galaxy in some way, we know that trans women and trans femme people are disproportionately targeted by our current anti-trans legislation. For example, all of the bathroom-related or sports-related laws, and famous anti-trans rhetoric. For example, commentary from people like J.K. Rowling, Dave Chappelle, and conservative talk show hosts, all targeting trans women and trans femme people specifically. So here's the question I want to explore. First, have you noticed this difference before? And second, why do you think this is the case? And again, I want to be clear that like trans masc people and trans men do experience transphobia, but I'm talking specifically about like the famous anti-trans rhetoric out there and the volume of legislation. Why? Why is that? And then the second part would be if there are other overlapping or intersecting identities within the trans experience you have seen lead to more privilege or less privilege. So lots of questions, but again, starting with, have you noticed the difference in terms of treatment toward trans femme people, trans women versus trans men, trans masculine people? And then the second part of that is, what are other ways you've seen overlapping or intersecting identities within the trans community afford more or less privilege? For anyone, everyone, questions you might have, other reflections, it doesn't have to even be a complete thought. I think that we're all different types of processors, and if you work things out in conversation, feel free to bring that up here. I'd love to know what, I don't know, are some lingering thoughts, top notes, high points, low points. If there is a specific question that you have about gender identity, gender expression, or a question you want to ask somebody else who's here. I think everybody's, shared and participated so wonderfully. So feel like you can address somebody else.